The question you had was, please make a tutorial on how to release, make a living as a Psytrance producer, and how to get booked. Actually, that's 3 questions, but I think it boils down to a very simple answer in the end. And let me elaborate this in this video. The answer to all of those 3 questions lies, in my humble opinion, in microeconomics. And the most important graph we will be looking at is here demand and supply. And it looks super simple, but in the case of music, I think it has some deepness behind it. What is the demand? The demand is basically all the people who have a need for listening to this kind of music. And the demand, for example, for techno music is higher because there's more people who are listening to techno than to Psytrance. Or if you go to pop, so popular music, then there's more people even listening pop than, let's say, techno. And so depending on your genre or even subgenre, you have a bigger or a smaller market. So you have more people or you have less people who actually want to listen to music. And now it becomes to get a little bit more complicated. So if we look a little bit closer on the demand side is people. And if we imagine one of those people, for example, Don listens to 10 tracks a day, and maybe he listens to 100 different tracks a month. So there's some tracks he listens more and some tracks he listens less. That's actually the thing which makes it so difficult for most producers out there, because there's a huge supply side of music. So there's, for example, 10,000 producers for full-on music, but Don can only listen to 100 a month. So what's happening here actually? And what's happening here is the iceberg, what I call it. And the iceberg is that there is like this 10,000 producers, which you see here. And from those 10,000 producers, most of them are under the water. Under the water means they don't make money, their tracks doesn't get listened to, they don't get shared, they don't get releases, they don't get bookings, and so on. And then there is like a small part of producers who actually make money, who get releases, who get their tracks out there and who get signed by labels and so on. And then there is like the tip of the iceberg, and that's maybe, let's say, 50 producers or 100 producers who get all the gigs, who get kind of like the major part of the money there, and who release most of the music out there, which gets released by labels. And the reason for that is, if we go back to Don, and Don can only listen to 100 tracks a month, so Don doesn't care about that there's like 10,000 tracks released every month, because he can only listen to a part of them. And now think logically, which 100 tracks of the 10,000 tracks would you listen to? Obviously the best ones. And yes, the best ones is a little bit subjective, because for everybody we have different tastes. Something is a little bit better and something is a little bit worse. So if we now kind of like look at all the million Dons in our demand size, then there's obviously like an overlap in taste, and there's some kind of like things which don't overlap. But in the end, I guess most of you guys agree that the overlap is probably more here in the tipping point, the most, and then it comes to kind of like the better kind of like produced music, and then comes maybe a few outliers for every Don in our million of the demand side. So maybe there's kind of like 10 listens here, and then there's like another 10 listens here, and there's another 10 listens somewhere here, or maybe 20 or something. But there's like 100 guys listening to that music here, and there's like 10,000 to listening that one. And that's exactly what you also will find on the release and the booking and the money-making side. So if we remember our Don, he can only listen to 100 pieces of music each month. So how does he decide? He decides for the best 100 pieces. subjectively best 100 pieces in his taste. So if you want to move from down to up here, then the most important driver is to produce better music than anybody else who supplies the same stuff. And if you're interested in how to produce better music, I have a full course over 10 months in which I teach you everything from A to Z about music production, which will help you to create the maximum quality, to bring out the full potential out of your music. And I have support from amazing artists. And the cool thing is you get like feedback on your music production from pro artists like Morsi, who is one of the talented producers out there in my opinion, Cosmic Sidekick, who I did 2 amazing EPs with, and myself. So if you like these tutorials or my music, then this is a good chance that we can actually help you with your music and bring out the maximum quality which you can produce. Obviously, there's a few more aspects on marketing than that, what I mentioned, but this one is really the most important. You can nail this even further down. I mean, we talked about the demand, and the demand is kind of like the overall market size, and you can nail this down to how many people in this overall market can you reach, and then how much of those people you reach can you actually supply. The reach only is important if you are self-releasing, if you're self-promoting your music. So if you go with a label, then the reach is basically the quality, because the higher the quality, the bigger the label, the bigger the reach, and also the better the music, the more kind of like higher it charts, the more energy the labels put into your music as well, because they might do like several posts and stuff. And how many people you can then actually serve is infinitive, because it's a digital product. You don't have any scaling costs at all. This might be a bit different if we're talking about different business models, like let's say one-on-one coaching, then your time might be limited. So that's things you need to consider then. And obviously, as I said, there's more to marketing, but if you really want to have a deeper dive into that, then I would recommend you, there's a comic book, Microeconomics. It talks about like a lot of principles in marketing. You can check that out. I will link to it in the description. But now there is some, let's say, little hack how we can tweak this supply and demand side here. So let's say you're creating some generic full-on, then the demand might be very high because a lot of people like kind of like what's out there. And the supply side, unfortunately, is also really high. And the problem is that we have a digital product which costs people nearly zero. So the only cost people have if they want to listen to music on, let's say, YouTube or Spotify, non-premium or any other streaming service, is that they have to watch ads. So whenever people just have time, can basically afford your product music. And that means like the demand side, as we have talked about in the beginning, is limited to the amount people can listen. And as there's like a huge overlap, people just listen to the subjective highest quality. And if there's like huge supply side, let's say 10,000 producers, they still will only pick maybe the top 1,000. And from that top 1,000, it's like the tip of the iceberg. The top 50 are getting most of the streams and most of the gigs and anything. But how can we hack this? So we can hack this by creating something where there's a demand, but not much supply. And how do you create something like that? You create something like that by offering people something unique. So you will have to find something which people still require where there is a demand. Because if you just find something which is unique, because you are just making music out of horse sound, then maybe there's no demand for it. But if you find something which is your unique style, or at least let's say in a niche where you don't have like 10,000 producers, but maybe only 30 producers who do something like that, but there's still a huge demand, then you can kind of like have even a lower production quality than your favorite, let's say, stars, but still earn some streams. And with streams, basically everything else also goes hand in hand. And if you understand this, that you need to have a certain demand, and your supply side, you need to be on the top half of the supply. And if you're not on the top half of the supply, there's only the two ways. You need to get better at producing, or you need to find something more unique which people still demand. And to make this point, how much quality actually does for you. Look at this track from Morse, which is, by the way, giving feedback on your homework in my course. So if you join the course, the premium version, then you have homework which you can submit. So you can submit your own projects for feedback on each module, kick, bass, drums, whatever the topic is. And you will get feedback from Morse, Cosmic Sidekick, and me. So you really want to level up your music production skills. But to make the point here, so this is like a really well done track, and it got released in Shamanic Tales, the label from Asterix, and you can see this thing charted almost the whole year so far. So it started like here in January, like last of January, and it's still in the charts. And that's what the difference between really high top-notch quality is and like everyday release. And yeah, obviously you might think, okay, this dude is much further than me. But you know, guys, in the end, it's just about being continuous, being dedicated, getting the right information and applying it. And this is like the hard part. I know there's like millions of YouTube tutorials like mine out there, but usually the crucial feedback cycle is missing, and you will get feedback not by someone, you will get feedback by really pro artists like Morse, for example, here. That's what makes all the difference. So I really hope for you that you join this course, the premium version, because that will make all the difference in your music production. But let's say you have found this, then everything else becomes really easy, because releases. Think of what a label wants. A label wants to sell your tracks, because if a label doesn't sell your tracks, they don't get back their initial investment, because they usually pay for mastering and artwork, and also they have a reputation, they need to do some work, they need to do posts of social media, building networks and all that. So they need to kind of like reimburse the costs. And how do they do that? They do that by selling your tracks. And we already discussed how to sell tracks. You sell tracks by being better than the rest. And being better than the rest means higher production quality and or more uniqueness. And the same goes for gigs. So if you are a party promoter, then there's, in my opinion, 3 entrance tickets. So the first and most obvious is, like a label, a party also needs to reimburse the costs. So we threw some parties in the past, and we still do. And room rents are sky high, at least here in my city. You pay like 1,500 euros per night for a room, and you don't even make the bar fee. So you need to make like 1,500 euros in entrance tickets just to get your costs back. And how do you sell entrance tickets? In hiring artists which people in your city like, and which they say, oh, this is a cool thing, there is coming XY to this club and I want to listen to his music. So in order to get yourself like into a club or a party, it's good if you have like followers. If you have followers on Instagram, on Spotify, if you're charting well. So if basically the promoter has the feeling, if we invite that guy, we don't make minus. That's kind of like the first, in my opinion, most important thing, because otherwise parties won't continue to exist. If they make minus each event, then there's no reason for that guys to continue, besides they whatever have like a huge inheritance and just enjoy making the parties. Then there are some, let's say, side factors, and the side factors is vitamin B. So if you know people, and you can do that by like hustling around. So if you go to parties, if you get to know like the guys who make the party, that makes it a little bit easier to get on the radar. But I still think like point number 1 is really important here, because if you're somebody who just started out, who has like 0 following, no streams at all, no sales of your music, then it becomes way harder to sell your music also to the promoters of the parties, obviously. And the third point, in my opinion, is if it comes to getting gigs is the guys need to like your music, obviously, and needs to fit the format of their party, because if they make a party for forest music, then there's no reason to apply if you're making happy progressive music. And the same thing, I guess, is for a lot of promoters who are not like fully like 100% on the commercially side. They always have like their heart in that thing as well, so they need to be a fan of your music as well. But this kind of like goes back to the supply and demand side. So if the promoter is one of the dons in your demand dons, then he must like your music, and he likes your music because the quality is higher than anything else which is supplied to him. Or let's say not anything else, but it's in the top tier of the supply of that unique kind of music you are producing. So I hope that kind of like sums it up. It's just my 2 thoughts on this, and in my opinion, it's kind of like general like marketing knowledge, which applies to everything. So at the moment, we have just talked about like selling your music to labels, to releases, and selling your music to getting gigs. But this applies, in my opinion, to anything. So if you're doing one-on-one coaching, if you're selling courses, if you're selling whatever else with your music, then you will need to have people who listen to your music. So there needs to be a demand, and you need to have high quality music, because otherwise they will choose another one-on-one guy, another masterclass, or anything else. They will always choose the kind of like best thing they can get for their money. And so you need to be really top notch in order to outperform all the other guys here. And unfortunately, there's like a lot of competition, and will get more through AI. So the more easy it becomes to produce a piece of music, the more music there will be there. But it doesn't really matter, because in the end, your DAW only can listen to 100 people. So if your AI produces now like 10-fold as much music, then there will be still like only like a best percentage of music for certain people, which they can listen to. And in the end, it's your decision if you want to be in there or not. And if you want to be in there, then I would do everything you can do with your time and money and resources to get in there. So I would take every course I can get out there, not just my courses. I would watch kind of like the most YouTube tutorials you can watch in the time you want to dedicate to this. And I would put a lot of repetition into your production, because we all know this kind of like 10,000 hours to mastery rule. So that's my 2 cents on it. And if you really want to get better, I'm starting my new course in September. So I hope you will join this course, because it will be a game changer for your music. And also there's like a 14 days money back. So if you decide this hasn't been worth your time and money, then there's no risk for you involved. You find all the information in the description box below, and see you in the next videos. And leave me a comment in the video what you want to know next, what you want to learn next, and if you have any questions to this topic as well.